Hello, here is Taras Temo here in Ukraine, in the Ukrainian Catholic University, with another live update from Ukraine about the main events of the war in which we are immersed these days. As you can see on my slide, it's day 170, which is very difficult to believe for me. I remember very vividly first days of the war when I started recording these updates, and they were practically daily, and the time flow was extremely intense, filled with emotions and events and very difficult emotional feelings. Whereas now the war became almost like a routine for us, and I'm sure for people who observe this war from the distance. But nevertheless, we need to remind ourselves and the international public of what is going on, and what is going on is actually extremely difficult, extremely heartbreaking. It's far from the end. There is a lot of tragedies and all kinds of dramas in this war that we need to follow and we need to bring to your attention. So I want to review today what has happened over the past several days since my last update. The more we observe the events of this war, the more this phrase that was coined during the World War I, the war of attrition, comes to our mind. It's the war when two sides of the conflict exhaust each other, and which one breaks first will probably lose the war. So it's not the war that will end in a triumphant march of Ukrainian troops into Moscow, or triumphant march of Russian troops into Kiev, or capturing the whole territory of Ukraine. The most likely scenario, according to all the experts, how this war will end is in the exhaustion of human and economical resources of one of the sides of this war. So what we are looking at is actually a kind of global competition in the providing of weapons to Ukraine, and Russian mobilization of their military resources internally, or with the help of such countries as Iran, who recently provided some weapons, especially military drones, to Russia. Perhaps China, and there were even some statements by Russian officials that they want to recruit military personnel from North Korea, and they quoted a number of 100,000 that is as a target for this recruiting campaign, which is obviously absurd and nothing like that will happen. But the Russian propaganda has used this as a kind of cheer up headline in the news for their own troops, that we will provide you with reinforcement from the volunteers from all over the world, from some Arab countries and from North Korea, which has not happened and will not happen for sure. This is just a propaganda slogan to demonstrate the successes of Russian diplomacy or so. So what happened over this 170 days of the war is that Russia has lost unprecedented number of manpower and all kinds of military equipment and weaponry. I just put this most recent picture here. It's a satellite picture of a Russian airfield, military airfield in the Crimea, that was recently hit by Ukrainian side. It's not clear still were some kind of rockets employed in this hit, or military drones, but as the result you can see this burned out airfield with the loss of from 9 to 15 aircrafts, and unknown number of personnel, but the explosion of the aircrafts, of the fuel, and especially of the ammunition, missiles and the like that was stored in the airfield was so powerful that it has blown out the windows and the doors from the buildings in the area of something like 3 kilometers around the airfield. So we can imagine how many soldiers must have died there, although we do not know any precise figures, and there is no way of knowing because this is obviously internal military information that Russian authorities will not make public. This leads to obviously huge economic losses due to the sanctions, due to the war that costs, by estimates, about $500 million a day for the Russian side. And this leads to possible social unrest in Russia, although unfortunately it's not close. It's not like the Russian society is boiling and revolting against this war. Far from it. There is actually rather substantial support for the war by the people who are heavily indoctrinated by Russian propaganda and support Putin, who buy the story that Russia had to attack in order not to be attacked first by Ukraine or by NATO troops. So they start selling this war to their own population as a defensive war. So this is just unthinkable what the propaganda can do. They can change black to white and white to black very easily, and then flood human minds from the TV screens with these absurd ideas, and people will buy it. Russia is also facing very severe shortage of military personnel, and the sign or the proof of this is that recently a number of human rights organizations in Russia that work with prisoners in Russian prisons and camps have reported that there is a sustained campaign on the part of the Russian state to recruit new soldiers among prisoners. And it started as a recruiting campaign in the special prisons for former policemen or special forces or military guys who are now serving their prison terms for whatever violations of the laws. And they were recruited first, but now they started to really massively recruit like real felons, people who are in prison for very severe crimes like rapes and killings, murder or other robberies and so on, and they give these people a chance to expiate for their criminal behavior and to become soldiers and to earn some money and earn pardon from the state, which obviously leads to the criminalization of the army. And we already have some reports internally from Russia that those criminals that have been freed from the prison and enlisted in the army start committing some crimes against civilian population in Russia, and obviously in the areas of fighting where they feel absolute impunity. They can do whatever they want, having weapons and having support of the Russian state. Obviously, the Russian side is not the only one that suffers from human and economic losses. In Ukraine, the situation is symmetrically bad. Obviously, our GDP, our economy is like at least 30% down, and we have huge losses in all sectors of economy. But the most heartbreaking losses are obviously human and also infrastructural ones, because as I reported in one of my previous videos, there are probably tens of thousands of human losses in Ukraine. Military losses are estimated at about 30 or 40,000 soldiers, and there is an unknown but very high number of civilian losses. And this is partially due, in a great part, due to the Russian style of the war, that is carpet bombing of the cities that are in the front lines. Thanks God we don't have any systematic shelling or bombing of cities far from the front lines in such a scale. We had obviously many bombardments and shellings in the first month of the war all over the country, but recently this have decreased and are limited to the targeted hits of military or quasi-military objects, whereas in the fighting area, what Russians do, they shell with artillery a town, usually towards its complete destruction, and only after the town is completely wiped out, they advance their troops, their soldiers, who slowly take over the ruins of the city or a town or a village. And there are several most infamous examples of this in the Donbas region, such cities as Popasna, Mariupol, obviously, and many others. And those were rather thriving, rather strong centers of industrial centers in the past, with from 30 to 100,000 inhabitants, and in the case of Mariupol, almost 500,000 inhabitants. And those cities are destroyed to such an extent that in many cases they cannot be rebuilt. There is no economic or whatever reason to restore them. It's easier to find another place and build city anew than to clean out the rubbles and restore the city in the place where it was before. So this is like a huge stress for the whole region and for the whole country to lose cities completely, and it's almost unheard of in the modern history what's happening there. I will just show you a few videos from social networks, which I think are especially graphically showing what's happening, like this image of the burned down fields in southern Ukraine, with the smoke in the distance, and as you can see, a fire truck going through, but there is nothing to save, nothing left to save from the harvests that were supposed to be harvested in August these days. Another problem we are facing is continuing nuclear threats from Russia, and these are not only the threats of using tactical nuclear weapons on the front lines, but also, as you know probably from the reports, it's everywhere in the media now, Russians have captured a large nuclear power plant, and they are threatening to blow it up if Ukrainian forces attempt to take over the region. There are incidents, reports of the shelling of this station, which the Russian side blames on Ukrainians, and the Ukrainian side says the official reports from our side claim that these are fabricated explosions by Russians themselves to increase the anxiety in the population and to threaten the international public with the explosion of the nuclear factory, which is about 6 times larger than Chernobyl. So if there is an explosion, God forbid, the result of it can be a new Chernobyl multiplied by 6. Obviously, there are many technical nuances to all that. Maybe even if they try to organize a targeted explosion of a nuclear power plant, one of those blocks, it might not work for them because they are well secured. But even the threat of that is already showing the nature of this conflict. I don't imagine any civilized country in the world to threaten the world with purposeful explosion, destruction of the nuclear power plant, to threaten basically whole Europe, or maybe even more than that. There are many atrocities reported, partially due to the involvement of Russian mercenaries, the infamous mercenaries that fought in Syria and in Africa, a private military company called Wagner, and some more. And also these criminals that are released from the Russian prisons. They do terrible things to captured Ukrainian soldiers, or sometimes to a local population. This picture is extremely graphic. It has circulated widely in the social media and in some even mainstream media, with a head, with the decapitated body and the head put on the fence, and then two hands next to the head. So this is just to give you a little hint at what is going on. It's not a normal war. It's not a nobly fought war. It's a war without any rules. You probably heard the reports of the castration of some Ukrainian soldiers that were filmed and then put on social media, and different atrocities apart from that have not been documented and circulated on the social media, but we know that they are happening. The last video I want to show today is really impressive and terrifying footage of a Russian missile system called Sunburn, and it's used as a powerful weapon to clean out buildings or heavily built areas from live power from our soldiers. And this slide I have shown you before, the completely destroyed Ukrainian towns, is the result of this terrible use of artillery and various rocket systems, which you can see on these short videos. This is filmed from a drone, and it shows how these phosphoric rockets or missiles are used, and they don't leave any chance for a human being to survive if you are in anywhere in the radius of the explosion. And they are used really intensively, as you can see on the video. Just put on the residential areas. Well, luckily there are no residents left there. It's only soldiers that keep their positions in those buildings, but still the scale of shelling is so terrible that obviously it leads to very high human casualties among Ukrainian soldiers. We will see what happens next. We will see to what extent Ukrainian troops can hold the ground on Donbass, and maybe to lead a counter-offensive in the southern Ukraine. I will try to follow this and keep you informed. In the meantime, please pray for Ukraine. Please support our struggle, our fight with whatever you can, and click like to this video, subscribe to this channel, share this video with others. I can very clearly see the decline of interest, to some extent the decline in the number of viewers on my channel, which is understandable because it's August and people are naturally tired and shifting their focus from this unpleasant war news to something more pleasant, more fun. But we need to keep our eye on this too. So please continue watching, continue supporting us, and thank you very much for watching this video. God bless.